Okay, so today we are doing a talk about the journey from abundance to scarcity, embracing the plenum of life. And this may be a word that doesn't make any sense to you, um, but it's a word I first heard from the quantum physicist David Bohm, who I particularly love. And a plenum, I'll type it in the chat here, as long as it doesn't autocorrect us. I'd never heard this word before. So if English is not your first language, it's not a commonly used English word by any means. So David Bohm was really interesting because he was a quantum physicist. But one of the things I loved about him was he wasn't just a pure scientist. He was raised in, I don't know, a small town in Philadelphia or one of the states. And he was raised in poverty, or had seen a lot of poverty around him. And his intention with study was to help heal the problems of the universe. And one of them was poverty. So to him, if I was going to study quantum physics, or if I was going to study anything, it had to be of some earthly good. It had to help, in a very real way. So he studied quantum physics. He was very, very bright, but he realized that this was too small. It wasn't big enough. We had to keep expanding. We had to look beyond just science if we were really going to help the world. Then he discovered Krishnamurti. And Krishnamurti was this great teacher of consciousness, of spirituality. He actually began, he was sort of brought into the fold by a metaphysics community. But he realized even that was too small. We had to keep growing. We couldn't be limited even by that seemingly really expansive concept. Well, Krishnamurti, this spiritual teacher, became great friends with David Bohm, and they spent 30 years discussing the links between quantum physics and consciousness. Like, that just blows my mind already. But because of this way of thinking, this way of expanding, no matter what, if we don't have the answer, let's expand. And if we still don't know, then we need to expand into another way. And this has a lot to do with our talk today. This idea that instead of contracting when things are hard, imagine expanding. Imagine instead of believing that we live in a place of scarcity, that we have limited options, that we actually, all we have to do is expand. This is a huge deal because it's almost like we've been we've been taught. Again, the word zeitgeist comes to mind. Again, not even an English word, but a zeitgeist is sort of a way of seeing the world that almost we all sort of buy into, because this is sort of what we were raised in, a concept of seeing the world. And the common zeitgeist is this idea of scarcity, that money doesn't grow on trees. In order to have even energy in the world to power our phones and our electricity, that we have to burn fossil fuels, and that's limited. And therefore, gasoline is limited, and is limited. Everything's limited. This is a very common perception, belief, philosophy, zeitgeist that we've internalized as truth. And then that internalization goes into every aspect of our life. It goes into, is there scarcity in love? Is there scarcity in work? Is there scarcity as to what's possible in my own personal journey? Is there scarcity in my health? What's really possible? Or is it limited? So David Bohm, he was really quite famous for turning whatever we thought on its head and saying, no, let's look at it the opposite way. If the way we're looking at it isn't giving us solutions, or it's limited, then maybe we have to look at it the opposite way. So let's imagine just the simple experience of us being alive right here. So right now we're sitting in our room or we're sitting outside or wherever we are, and we perceive the air around us as being relatively empty, right? Sure, we can say, oh, well, there's oxygen and there's, that kind of thing in it, or nitrogen or something. But for all intents and purposes, the current zeitgeist, the current idea in our mind says that this around me is empty, right? This is solid. The computer I'm talking to is solid. The home around me is solid. The trees I see are solid. And everything in between is space. So then if you imagine the earth, right? You imagine this earth. I'm always amazed when I fly, or even when I would just imagine the earth, and you think of this earth and you look down at all the little humans and all the little buildings and all the little cars, and how little the physical aspect of the earth actually takes up, right? So it almost does feel like a little bit like a scarcity, but there's so little here, and there's all this space, all this air, all this atmosphere, and it's just empty, right? So even when we look inside the atom, we say, oh, well, there's protons and neutrons and, and electrons and stuff. But really, it's 99% nothingness. Like there's so much in our languaging even that says scarcity. There's nothing there. There's no options, right? Like it's sort of this, our language interprets this space as nothing. So David Bohm said, what if we've got it all wrong? What if we turn this idea on its head and say, what if the space around us is full? What if it is a plenum, plenty, plentiful, plenum? What if the things we consider to be solid are actually what's empty, right? This is the land of quantum physics, where you're always making funny faces going, right? So he said, like, what if this hair is emptiness and everything around is a plenum? What if this computer is an emptiness and everything around is full? So this is very, very hard to conceptualize, right? So he said it's like imagining the ocean. Imagine you had goggles on and you're swimming through the ocean, or you're swimming through the lake. The water looks like nothingness, right? You can't see the water, and yet the water is full. What can we see when we're swimming through water? Bubbles. We can see bubbles, and the bubbles are emptiness in the plenum. And he said, imagine we saw the world like that. Imagine all the things, the people, the experiences were actually emptiness as we swam through the plenum. So this is a really interesting idea. And again, the cool thing about ideas in quantum physics, it's not about being a quantum physicist. It's always just about expanding our brains, hopefully to the point that they maybe hurt a little bit, because that means we're bumping up against a belief system, what do you call it? A stronghold, something that doesn't want to shake, right? So it's like, no, I don't want to imagine that. I'm really attached to the way I'm seeing it now. Quantum physicists are philosophers. Mathematicians are philosophers. This is what they do. They go, whoa, what if that's possible? So then the key is to live in the question. It's not about understanding it. It's not about being able to explain it. It's not about it's not about trying to get our rational brain to be able to fully get it. It's about exploding the boundaries and allowing us to float in the plenum and seeing what else is possible in our life, in our consciousness. These were some of the big things that David Bohm talked to Krishnamurti about, because Krishnamurti was very interested in consciousness. And I mean, he said a million things in his life, but one of the things he talked about is how our thoughts create our reality, which, I mean, we've all heard in many, many different incarnations. But when you think about that, if our thoughts create our reality and our thoughts are limited, maybe our thoughts are limited to our current philosophy. Maybe our thoughts are limited by our fears. Maybe our thoughts are limited by our attachments. Well, if our thoughts create our reality, and they are limited by all of these things that we carry with us, then our reality is limited. Then we live in a scarcity situation. And then we come to a place in our life that we believe we have no options. And that's why I want to talk about this today. Because when we come to a place that we believe we have no options, we die. Like some part of us just doesn't know what to do anymore, because it's not our nature. Our nature is infinite. Our nature is to have this, that anything's possible. We are divine beings, incarnate, here on the planet. We were given this interesting assignment, whatever it was, to go out and explore the plenum. So isn't it interesting when we've accumulated interesting thoughts, philosophies, beliefs, attachments, fears that limit this divine experience of an abundant world? And this is interesting. People often talk about, when in spiritual circles, they'll say, you've got to do the work. What's the work? Like, what does it really mean to do the work? And sometimes all we're doing is just looking at these weird ideas we picked up along the way. And again, sometimes they are so internalized because they're simply part of the zeitgeist that we were raised in. Whatever culture we were raised in, whatever family we were raised in, that we don't even know to question it because it's just always been there. It's like I was watching this show called Murdoch Mysteries that was set in Toronto in the 1800s. And to think that the suffragette movement was radical, that women were put in jail for wanting to vote, that it was illegal to be gay, that you could be put in prison for the rest of your life because you're gay. Like, this is crazy town, right? In our current zeitgeist, it's like, how could we ever have even believed it? And yet the masses had internalized whatever they'd been taught, and they didn't even know how to question it. Like, think of what a limited view, right? So that's the fun thing. That's the exciting thing of imagining the world as a plenum. Imagine we really live in abundance. So what I want to do today is I want to really apply this to real life situations. Like, what does this mean? Like, to go beyond the philosophy of it, to really say, okay, but what about this thing? Right? So for example, let's look at love. Love is one of the places that I believe, or I've seen, that we feel the most scarcity. And this can be in relationship, this can be out of relationship, this can be wanting relationship, because love is something that I do think is inherently human. It is how the human being connects with other humans. My first spiritual teacher, Jim, he used to actually define love as connection. That there might be different versions of it and different depths of it, but it really just is human connection. So you imagine we live in this world with 7.5 billion people and rising every day. So the idea that there's a scarcity of people to love or to feel connection with can't be true, right? So imagine we sit here and we imagine in our life, well, no, I'm all alone here, though. I'm sitting in my house all alone. There's a scarcity. But when we see the world as a plenum, and we actually close our eyes, and instead of seeing nothing out there, we see 7.5 billion people. Like, this is a number we can't even conceptualize. So now instead, look out and see 7.5 billion bodies all over the world. These are 7.5 billion people we can connect with. Like, that's a plenum. Period. So how do we connect with them? How do we find them? Well, we go out. We call people and we go for coffee. We volunteer. We will go next door to our neighbor's house and say, hey, you want me to rake your leaves for you? Do you want to go for a walk? You know, we've never even talked before. I've never even met you before. I mean, at the beginning, people might think you're weird. There might be a weird factor here. But the problem is we just aren't creative enough as to how to connect with that plenum of humanity we're actually surrounded by. Like, I live in a town of 8,000 people. Goderich has 8,000 people. And do you know how many of those people are lonely? You know how many people would love, I mean, it could be seniors, and we always go to the seniors, but we could go to seniors, whether they're living in a home or they're living at their home or whether they're, who knows? And you could say, hey, you know what? I love singing war songs. Do you want to sing war songs sometime? Or do you want to, I'd love to read you a book. I'd love to chat. I'd love to whatever. This is a connection. Like, this is the weird thing about love. We have this thing about love. We have this, okay, so when we look at what are the things that limit our ability to connect with other people? Thoughts, belief systems, and attachments, right? What are the thoughts that stop me from just going out there and saying, hey, you want to have a cup of tea? Like, people used to have coffee clutches, where you just invite the neighbors over for coffee. You just hang out. You just do stuff. Maybe you go to I love dog parks. Like, I was in Toronto yesterday. We stayed with a friend of mine. So my son and my friend and I were having our coffee and our sandwich sitting outside a dog park, and we're just chatting away. And of course, I'm brutal, right, outside of a dog park, because I just want to watch the dogs. Like, I'm so entertained by them, right? So of course, then I have to do voiceovers for the dogs. I don't mean to do this. It is literally just what happens when my stream of consciousness starts to flow uninhibited. And I'm like, oh yeah, and then that dog went, oh my God. And then this dog went like, whoa. And I'm like literally doing this play-by-play of what the dogs are doing in the dog park. And my son's not even blinking because he's known me for 26 years. So this is like, what else would she be doing but, giving voices to the dogs? And my friend, she's just looking at me going, you really need to have a TikTok channel. Because, of course, I was talking about TikTok earlier. Shocker. And she's like, this is what you do all the time. I'm like, yeah, of course I do. And I'll tell you what else. I'll walk into that dog park happily and talk to anybody about their dogs. Because I love that. And what if you just became the weird person drinking coffee, talking to all the dog owners about their dogs? It's anything's possible, right? It could be anything. It could be joining an art class or, and depending on what's going on in your part of the world, who knows how you do it? Maybe you connect over Zoom. Maybe you connect however you connect. But there are all these people out there. And the wild thing is, connection is connection. I remember when there was a point a few years ago, just before actually I left Canada, I was just going through a lot of personal dark nights of the soul. I don't remember what they were about. And I started feeling very lonely. I just went through a time when but again, so I had an attachment. This was like almost like a belief system merged with an attachment. They're very sneaky how they wind us up inside. But it's more like I was attached to the belief that people should message me, and that if people messaged me, it meant that they loved me and that they were interested in me. So I wouldn't message them first because they need to message me, because that reflects my sense of self-worth and something. It was almost like I was setting myself up to feel crappy about myself, right? It was crazy. So I sat there stewing about the fact, wow, I woke up this morning and nobody texted me. It must be because I'm a loser. It must be because they don't like me. It must be because whatever. And every so often I would say something like this to one of my kids, and they'd be like, Mom, you have a million friends. What are you talking about? Why do you do this to yourself? They just literally think I'm crazy. And so that one of their voices must have popped into my head. And finally I went, Katrina, text someone, go out for coffee, go out for dinner, go for a walk, invite them over for a movie. Your limitations are creating this loneliness. Period. End of story. There's nothing else to it. So I sent out a couple messages, and next thing you know, I was so busy, I didn't even know what to do, right? I just was too busy now. Too many people in my life. And it was like a fraction of a minute difference. So it's just really interesting. So even if we don't have a pile of friends, then we have to make them. We have to somehow connect with these 7.5 billion people, this plenum of humanity that exists in the world. And maybe we find it through things we love to do. Maybe we find it through book clubs. Maybe we find it through art classes. Maybe we find it through volunteering. Maybe we find it through dog parks. Who knows? I mean, one of my favorite communities of people are a bunch of people I've never even met before, because when I watched David Bohm's movie Infinite Potential, which I highly recommend, Infinite Potential, The Life and Times of David Bohm, mind-blowing, right? A year ago, I watched this movie. These people started doing courses with all of his compatriots and colleagues. I started doing Zoom classes with them. A bunch of us have continued to study together. We gather once a month from people all over the world over Zoom, discussing the hollow flux, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, about this amazing sense of renewing into the universe all the time. And we meet once a month. And it's so cool because it's kind of this group of introverts. It's this group of academics who aren't really out in the world and doing things. And the last month that we met, it was really neat because we're all sitting on Zoom. There's about, I don't know, anywhere between 30 and 50 of us, depending on the month. And people were actually sharing how much they looked forward to connecting this way. It was like this, it was sort of this gathering of the introverts. It was really beautiful. And anyway, it is really beautiful. So this idea that there's a scarcity in love, this scarcity of connection, it's so valuable to sit within and ask, what are the belief systems I have around connecting? What are the thoughts that rise even as I'm talking about this right now? And what are the attachments I have to my current state of being? Do I have issues trusting people? Am I afraid to be hurt? Am I afraid that I'm going to look stupid? Am I afraid that they're going to reject me? What is it that locks me in as this singularity in this plenum? What is it? Again, it's different for every single one of us, but it's just a valuable pondering, something to take into our meditation or into our journaling. Another place that we often feel a lot of scarcity is money, work, right? We think, oh, well, if I lose this job, what will I do? And that's a really interesting thing because, again, we have to look at our belief systems, our attachments. Why do I think this is the only work I want to do? The only work I could do? Why do I think this is it? Like, do I have an attachment to the prestige of this work? Do I believe that, I could never do that? Do I believe that I have to make this amount of money for some reason? Because I have to live in this community, that I have to have this number of cars, that I have to have this kind of lifestyle? Is that why I then feel that there's a scarcity in the options that I could do for work? Interesting. Like, it's weird that we sort of pigeonhole ourselves in these places and then believe we have no choice. But the truth is we just have to back up and say, well, I'm always intrigued with, when the world sort of, it's not, now I just sound like a weird Hallmark card, but when the world closes a door, all that stuff. But it is interesting. The people I know that actually have money, and I don't mean like wealthy people, I mean just they have money. These people are happy to do anything. Oh, you need me to take care of your kids? Sure. Oh, you want me to clean your house? Sure. Oh, you want me to dig that trough? Sure. Oh, you want me to fix your car? Sure. Like, it's sort of like we did a talk a while ago about the state of consciousness in David Hawkins about neutrality and willingness. And these people live in a state of willingness. Oh, is that what's needed? Awesome possum. I'll do that. Oh, is that what's needed? I'll do that. And when we really look at, again, the zeitgeist around career, work, that even in our education system, you don't want to close the door. You don't want to do this. You must always, reach for the top. Like the goal is to whatever, 6 figures, whatever this is. It's so weird that we've been, we are these divine, infinite creatures. And we've been told that the work we do is valued based on the money that we receive. we are infinite creatures. And don't get me wrong, I know we have to pay bills and we have to pay rent and all that. I get it, right? But it's just so funny when you really look at the belief systems that are holding us in a pattern, and it's like, but none of that even matters. We're here to explore a plenum. It doesn't matter how much money we have stored away or how big our house is or all that. We're here to explore the plenum. So how much money do we need? What do we want to do? How do we want to contribute to the village? What do we want to do? Do we love taking care of animals? Do we want to build a house? What do we want to do? Do we want to be the entertainment? Like, what do we want to be? What do we want to do? Like, there's literally infinite options. Even, let's say we can't walk anymore. We can't do this. Then we have internet. There's so many possibilities. It's almost like this thing that, can I expand the possibilities in my mind wide enough to find something that not only meets whatever financial needs I have, but actually I really like doing. I'm kind of entertained by it. There's so many interesting options out there. And to really look at what's needed. Because sometimes, again, a lot of this world we live in is very, it's kind of made up, right? It's kind of this strange virtual world of fabricated jobs and levels of management and all these things, right? So we're sort of told, well, just create what you want and make it happen. as opposed to going, what if I just look around and see what's needed? And then I look inside my own heart and, well, what gifts do I have to offer? What if it's simple like that? And it's weird because when we go that way, suddenly there's all these different options. So again, it's very, very interesting. If you experience scarcity around money or career or work, the questions become, okay, what are my thoughts around this? What are the thoughts that are repeating like mantras in my head about money, career, and work? Like, I don't have an answer because each one of us is unique, right? Like, how we're meant to explore this place is perfectly unique. Or maybe we ask ourselves, what belief systems do I have around career and money? Pride, fear, all these things. And then we look at the attachments. What am I attached to? Am I attached to the prestige? Am I afraid of what people would think? Am I, what? What's going on there? It's fascinating. Like, how do I explore this incredible plenum of a universe, and still be able to put food on the table? That's an interesting adventure, right? And then there's relationships, like, and beyond love. Like, love to me isn't about relationships, right? It's obviously part of it. But love, like the first thing I talked about, love to me is love in the world. Connecting in the community, connecting with people. Love isn't just about finding this, princess or knight in shining armor that I'm going to cleave to for the rest of my life. That's not, love as a human is about being part of humanity. So that's what we were first talking about. But now I want to talk about relationships, because very often we feel a lot of scarcity. I just want a partner. I just want someone who loves me back. I want to feel like I matter. I want to feel special. That kind of thing, right? So sometimes we feel this scarcity inside a relationship. Maybe you're in a long-term relationship or a short-term relationship, and you feel like your options are limited as to what you can experience there. Maybe you have no interest in leaving or changing or anything like that. So we feel like, well, I just have to accept that this is the way. And this is what's really interesting, because when you imagine that your thoughts are actually coming from an infinite store, an infinite number of possible thoughts, that means that there's an infinite number of things that could be said. There's an infinite number of ideas that can be shared. So even within a relationship, sometimes we get stuck that, oh no, well, they won't like that. Oh no, I've tried that before. And then the funniest thing is like, well, when did you try that? Oh, 20 years ago, I said that and they totally... And it's like, we change, we grow, right? Different things are possible. Like if I was to do, sometimes people ask me if I was to do anything different in my marriage, because, for any of you that's new, I was married for 20 years and we split maybe 7 years ago. And people often ask, well, what would you have done differently? And the truth is nothing, because I truly believe that it all played out perfectly, and I'm very happy with who I am today, so I don't want to change anything. But if I was able to create an alternate reality, I would have been more open to other possibilities. I would have allowed for things outside of the belief systems. I had a lot of attachments inside the marriage. I had a lot of attachments to what love looked like and what was possible and what you were allowed to say and what you weren't allowed to say. And you could have a belief system in marriage that, well, it's a happy marriage if you do everything together. It's a happy marriage if you do nothing together and you have individual lives. It's a happy marriage if we only take holidays together. It's a happy marriage if we have the same belief systems. It's a happy marriage if we're monogamous. It's a happy marriage if we're polyamorous. It's a happy marriage if, like, we have a lot of belief systems that say these are the only ways. And by the time like a tree diagram and you go, okay, only this possibility is possible and only this possibility is possible. By the time you get to the bottom, there's only one possibility. And you feel stuck. So it's just about opening back up that tree diagram, even inside the relationship, right? And maybe you're not in a relationship right now, but you desperately wish you were. The most fascinating thing, and I mean, in no way can I tell you, where to find the love of your life or anything like that, because that's a much bigger question and a much bigger topic. But the funny thing about that is it actually blends more into the other things we talked about here. When we start branching into humanity and connecting out into the world, we start connecting with other people who are connected to other people who are connected to other people. That's the key. It's never about making ourselves smaller, making our social circles smaller. It's never about that. It's about being out in the world. Maybe you pursue a different thing financially or career-wise or interest-wise, and suddenly you find yourself in a community of people that love talking about the things you love to talk about. And then what's amazing about that is when you talk about the things you love to talk about, your passion shines through, your light shines through. And then someone else sees your light. And they go, hey, I like this light I'm seeing. You want to go have coffee? Right? And now suddenly you maybe become friends, or maybe you become more, or whatever. But it all comes from that kind of going out in the world and knowing there's a great big wide world out there. It's hard to connect with people who kind of think they're just sort of here and you're their only outlet to the whole world and you're their only outlet to all happiness. Without you, there's nothing. Like, it's kind of easier to find love in a plenum, when we truly believe that it's a plenum out there. So then I want to talk about our personal journey, right? Our personal journey, this personal experience of the universe. Do I believe that my personal path is limited? That only certain things are open to me? Or is it a plenum? Are there infinite possibilities here? I remember back when cassette tapes were a big thing. My dad used to order cassette tape sets from, I think it was Earl Nightingale, somebody Nightingale. And he used to get these big cassette things with Wayne Dyer talking, or Bernie Siegel talking, or Deepak Chopra talking, or whoever. But there was one set of, I think it was Earl Nightingale. And he used to talk about, and so this is really going back, right? Cassette tapes. So we're going back 30 years anyway, right? So what he talked about was that we never had any excuse for being let go in work. It's so funny how our focus has changed. It was all about work, right? That people were afraid of getting downsized out of their job or something like that. And his theory was that you never had any excuse for that because you should always be growing and expanding. And he said, let's say you worked for a company that was an international company. Let's say that company, let's say you lived in Canada and you were English, and they did work in Quebec, right? So if you're not familiar with how the English-French thing works in Canada, 98% of the French-speaking people live in Canada or just surrounding areas around Canada, and there's some in the maritime provinces in the east. But most of Canada is very, very English speaking. Like, I took French all the way into university, but I never got a chance to speak it. I never got a chance to practice it. So my French is very, very limited. Like Northern Ontario for sure, like near Quebec, like there's a lot of French up there. But let's say I live in some part of Canada that's very, very, there's no French. And I work for a company that happens to have French outposts. Well, I could be always learning French. Or maybe I worked for a company that had a lot of Spanish connections or Dutch connections or who knows what connections. you could always be learning another language. You could always be learning another tool, another skill. And his whole thing was, at the time, of course, it was a TV time, right? This is 30 years ago. So it wasn't computers, it wasn't phones, it wasn't Netflix, it was TV. And his thing was, if you took 1 hour every night out of your TV watching and learned one new skill, by the end of the year, you would have accumulated 365 hours learning a new skill. That's a phenomenal amount of hours learning anything at all. If you took Italian and you practiced Italian for 365 hours in a year, you'd have some good Italian under your belt. If you spent 1 hour painting, if you spent 1 hour learning how to do electrical work, if you spent 1 hour learning anything every day, you'd have 365 hours. If you wanted to read, if you wanted to study yoga, if you want to spend 1 hour in meditation every single day, think of the expansive possibilities. It's our personal journey. It's 100% about our choices. How do we spend our waking hours? I remember even when I had kids and I had the farm and, there just wasn't the hours in the day, right? Like, if I had heard someone like me speaking 25 years ago, I'd been like, yeah, okay, go back to your Himalayan cave and go and meditate. I don't know what you're talking about. There are those of us that actually have work. Like, I get it, 100%. But then I have friends who, they were raised in really serious spiritual communities where they believed that every day, like this one friend of mine I've talked about before, she had 2 hours of spiritual practice for the last 40 years, no matter what, through husbands, through 3 children, through work, through everything, because this was her priority. My belief system didn't make this a priority. My belief system didn't make me a priority. Period. Could I have squeezed in an hour of reading every day? Sure, I could have. 100%. Right? But instead I did other things. Maybe I was obsessed with getting the dishes washed. Maybe I had a belief that I can't go to bed while the kitchen's not clean. I can't go to bed, or I can't, whatever. Right? Could I have made a difference? Sure. Would I probably have been a happier person? Probably. It's a fascinating thing in our personal journey, how much choice we actually have and how infinite the possibilities are. Because the crazy thing is, my biggest challenge with reading, like I'll often say things on here saying, I'm reading this book, or I'm reading this book, or I'm reading this book, or I'm reading this book. And it kind of sounds like I'm reading 12 books. Because I am, right? Because I'll start reading this one book, and all of a sudden he'll mention something, and I'll go, whoa. And then I'll go and research this, and then I'll get reading that, and that'll sort of send me over here. And I'm on this amazing, weird journey of exploration. But in the end, I end up that I'm actually reading 12 books at a time, kind of. Right? My reality is somewhere in the middle of all of this amazing adventure. The other interesting thing that we often feel scarcity about is our health, our wellness. And I mean our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health. We can often feel very limited, maybe by genetics, by circumstance, by trauma, by even where we were born in our life, what country, what socioeconomic status, what, and we feel very, very limited. And this is a journey for everyone to take in their own time. But I know for me, when my mom got sick, like before my mom was sick, she got sick when I was about 20. And before that, I was always interested in alternative health, holistic thinking, the connection of the mind and body. But it wasn't until my mom got sick that I had to figure out how it actually connected into reality. And so my mom was diagnosed with cancer. I think I was about 20. And so again, 30 some odd years ago. And and they gave her, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks to live, right? She was diagnosed with cancer. And so here's the limitation, right? We had the limitation that all the women in my family had died of cancer. So we were one of those families. We just have those genetics. We just have those whatever, those markers, whatever, right? So here's the limitation. Here's the limitation. Well, we can do chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. Here are the limited, And that was when, as a daughter, I was like, no, there have to be other options. There have to be other options. This can't be it. And it kind of exploded the walls that anyone ever put on me to say, here are your options only. Right? I was 20 years old. No way. My sisters were 18 and 16. No way. These were the only options. And a whole new journey of exploration began. Whole new journey into alternate thinking and healing through Ayurvedic or energy systems, or there's so many possibilities when it comes to health. So many possibilities, even how we look at health. We can look at health through the physical body, through the Western model of the respiratory system and the lymphatic system and all these things. We can look at the body through the Chinese medicine perspective of the 5 elements and understand balance and how these different things move through the system. We can look through the body through Ayurvedic lens of the 3 doshas and finding how the different winds move through and the energies. There are so many ways of looking at this incredible body and mind and spirit. It's a plenum of possibilities. And the answer is, and it's, again, everything I'm saying sounds so corny, but the journey through all these things, that's the point. So while my mom was sick, I explored all of these things for the 3 years she was sick. She died, and she died when I was pregnant with my son, with Aaron. And of course, then I dove into a whole different part of life. I was now a mom. I was married at the time. I was, all these things. We'd bought the farm. We had all these things going on. So I wasn't researching mind, body, spirit stuff much, right? Then my life went like this, and it went like this, and it got bigger and bigger and more busy, or busier. And then all of a sudden in 1999, I got sick, and now the rubber had to hit the road. Suddenly all those things that I had to do every day that I didn't have time for personal work and it's like, okay, you have a 2 and a 4-year-old and you have lumps in your breast now. Now what are you going to do? And all the walls disappeared, and I had to embrace that plenum again, because I didn't want to leave my kids like my mom had to, and her mom, and all, Health is really interesting. And for every single one of us, it is so unique. So, for me, I went through a whole story and a miraculous healing, and obviously I'm still here. And I wrote my first book, What If You Could Skip the Cancer? Because people kept asking me, okay, so what's the cure? What's the cure for cancer? What did you do? All that kind of thing. And it was like, that's not it. It's the plenum. I didn't have these words then, but it's the plenum. There's this huge infinite space that each one of us has this beautiful personal journey to wander through. Whatever that is, that's how we'll each grow. By the time I was sick, I had already learned all these things from my journey when my mom was sick. You know what I mean? They were the seeds that then could open. There were all these little seeds that I had been raised with. Maybe it was being raised inside the church. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was being a mother. Maybe it was this. These were the seeds that were ready to be opened for my personal healing journey. So every single one of us has this unique thing. So the book's called What If You Could Skip the Cancer? The book is really about listening inside. It's really about listening to your intuition, connecting with your infinite space inside, your God, however you understand that, so that you can kind of navigate infinity. Like, this is the thing about abundance. Sometimes I don't, like, it's, people have said this. It isn't that we think it's scarcity. We're actually afraid of the abundance. We're afraid of the infinite possibilities. It's like, yeah, but how do I navigate infinity? This is the challenge, right? We're given it right here. This is our infinite self. This is our navigation tool through infinity. To trust this, that's the journey, right? That's why we're studying yoga. That's why we study meditation, so that we connect our physical self with this spiritual self, and we are able to navigate abundance in our perfect, unique, and interesting way. That's, to me, the whole spiritual journey. Like, that's how we connect it into our life. The last thing I want to mention is there's a beautiful idea. If you've ever seen a torus, a toroidal field, I'll type this in, torus or toroidal field. If you Google that, you'll see pictures of a donut, and the energy, imagine a donut and there's an emptiness in the center. And from the donut, energy comes in through the center and around, right? It comes around like this. It can go up, it can go either direction, but it's going around. And in the center is this stillness. And there are many people who are looking at this. They've been looking at it for a long time, but they're definitely looking at it right now. Because and this is a huge topic, but the idea is that the energy is coming in, filling us, then we're putting it out. So imagine, what does this feel like? So if you feel inside your own self, you feel your heart, and realize your heart is, in Sanskrit, it's called anahat, unstruck chord, empty, right? We come back to this idea of emptiness. Is it nothingness? Or is it clarity? Or is it the potential for all things to happen? So now imagine in your own being, here is your center. Now you have energy coming in like a torus. It's coming in, going down to the earth, out, coming in, coming down. What's it picking up in that outward swing of the donut? The energy of the plenum, right? We are drawing the energy of the plenum into our being all the time. It can be in the form of thoughts. It can be in the form of ideas, inspiration, oxygen, sunshine, friendship, love. All these things we've talked about, all of this plenum that we are living within. We are drawing it in like this torus, constantly pulling it in all the time, right? What an interesting way to live. Imagine as you meditate, actually feeling the infinite plenum being drawn in all the time. And this is really interesting, and I love that personally. That is so empowering for me, invigorating. As I walk through the world, the air around me is no longer empty. Because it's everything. It's every breath coming into me, nourishing me, revitalizing me, renewing me, this spirit in every second, And even if you want to really go down a fun rabbit hole, look up Tesla and the whole idea of free energy, and the idea that using electromagnetic energy, you can actually harness this energy in these beautiful coils and actually create free energy in the world. Like, There are so many fun rabbit holes to go down in the land of actually experiencing this plenum around us, this infinite abundance all around us. It's an amazing thing. So even, the next time we meditate, like even right now, wherever you are, sitting, lying down, standing, walking, wherever you are right now, to actually feel this center in your heart, right? And feel the plenum all around you. And then feel movement, however you feel it. Maybe you feel it coming up and through. Maybe you feel it coming down and through. However you feel it, but imagine the interaction between your center and this plenum all around you. How does it flow? Does it flow in? And it's so wild because once you feel this flowing, it's like it's perpetual motion. For whatever reason, it doesn't need to stop. It doesn't need to be limited. It doesn't need anything like that. It'll just flow effortlessly. So here we are, these incredible beings walking around the planet through a plenum with this perpetual motion of energy constantly coming in, constantly renewing, constantly inspiring. And all we have to do is, release the things that stop the flow. And I know that's easy to say, but that's something we can do, right? Joe Dispenza measured the energy field of the heart. Honestly, it's so true. Like they talk about the difference between the electrical charge of the brain and the electrical charge of the heart, and how the heart magnetically is so huge, right? I felt shivers feeling the flow of energy, right? Like, I really, after this talk, or the next time you meditate, or the next time, to go out in the world, go outside, feel the air, feel the gentle wind, and know that it's a plenum. And without forcing anything, to just feel the energy start to flow through you effortlessly. Like this is the other thing about the scarcity model. In the scarcity model, we believe we have to effort to do things, right? We don't have to effort. We just have to let it flow through us and enjoy the inspiration, So many wonderful, wonderful options. How to block bad energy. You know what's interesting? It's a great question. Because it's almost like, I remember talking to a psychic once when I was living in Toronto. And when I lived in Toronto, I lived on this 36th floor of this condo right at Yonge and Wellesley, like right downtown. I mean, I was probably in the midst of, I don't know how many cell towers and Wi-Fi signals and, radio signals and who knows, right? And she said, use the energy. You are an electrical conduit. Use it to empower your chakras. It's up to you. It's just energy. You choose what you're going to do with it. And that's fascinating, right? It's a fascinating thing. And then the question becomes, what if the bad energy we feel, maybe that's pushing against something and it's telling us something. Maybe it's helping us on our journey. It's showing us the places where we're blocked. In the land of what's right about this. If someone comes along and they have really bad energy, you kind of go, is that a memory? Is that something inside of me? Is it something, why is it triggering me? Why isn't it just flowing through and on by? Why am I grasping it for some reason? Why am I resonating with it? How do I know if I'm blocking the flow of energy? I would guess, especially in the context of this talk, that we feel scarcity, that we feel stuck, that we feel that we don't have choice in some way. That whatever, if that's what we're feeling, then I must be blocking something. I must believe something that's not allowing a different option. Oh, you just started Tantric Intimacy. You know what's crazy about Tantric Intimacy, the book, is that if you look at hold on a second, guys. So when I was putting my book together and I was trying to design the cover, I had this idea that this is what it was going to look like. And this guy who I had sent it to, I would send it out to a bunch of friends. Do you like this one? Do you like this one? Do you like this one? And he had just gone on, I don't know, it was an ayahuasca journey or something. And he had this vision of the inside of a torus, the inside of a donut. And the crazy thing is, that's what the inside of the donut would look like. I had no idea. I literally just made this up. And that is what the energy would look like in our heart center of a torus field. Isn't that cool? I had no idea. So, anyway, so fun. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon.